There's a moment, isn't there? So subtle, so quiet, you almost convince yourself you imagined it. A pause in their voice, a message that takes just a little too long to arrive, a fleeting shift in the air, and suddenly, your entire body is on high alert. Without meaning to, your mind transforms into a frantic mapmaker, redrawing every memory, every word, every interaction, searching for the exact moment when the ground began to tremble beneath your feet. This isn't overthinking, it's a full-body alarm, a soul-deep radar that detects the tiniest fractures in your connections. If you've ever felt your peace vanish in an instant replaced by the sharp sting of panic, then let these words find you. Type, "I am not alone" in the comments and know that this space is your mirror. You are seen here. You are understood. When a simple change of plans sends tension flooding through your body, when a comfortable silence suddenly feels like an accusation, you might wonder, am I being too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Let me tell you the truth, you're not. What you're feeling is the sacred echo of past wounds, the energetic memory of instability, betrayal, abandonment. It's your soul's way of saying, we've been here before, be ready. That need to fix, to explain, to keep things smooth at any cost that's not weakness. That's the strategy your younger self designed to survive in a world that often felt unpredictable and unsafe. It's the warrior inside you, still scanning the horizon for the next threat, even when the sky is clear. This is not your flaw. This is your brilliance forged from necessity. But it's also your invitation to gently remind yourself, you are safe now. You don't have to fight the invisible anymore. This tightening, this hyper-readiness, is your sacred attempt to control the uncontrollable. Somewhere along your path, control became your shield, your crown, your protection against life's chaos. Not because you chose it, but because you learned through silences after your truths, through sudden goodbyes, through shattered trust that the world was too unstable to simply flow with. You braced yourself. You learned to think 10 steps ahead. You tried to force life to behave because it stopped giving you answers when you needed them most. And in the rubble of uncertainty, you built a fortress of control. But here's the heartbreaking truth you're finally ready to hear. That fortress is also your cage. That crown of control, it is heavy, unbearably heavy. That grip, the constant scanning, fixing, predicting, isn't protecting you, it's draining you. It's what's making life feel like an endless uphill battle. It's not the world that's heavy, it's the exhausting effort of holding it all together. Control seduces you with promises. Hold on tight enough and nothing bad will happen. But what it delivers is exhaustion, numbness, a life spent managing risks instead of living. You wake up already anticipating everything that might go wrong. You're not living, you're performing a relentless risk assessment. And my dear soul, you weren't born for this. You weren't made to be the manager of the universe. You were made to feel, to experience, to trust the river of life instead of trying to dam it with your bare hands. You live with a quiet, crushing pressure just beneath your skin, the pressure to manage others' emotions, to anticipate their needs, to ensure your energy never inconveniences anyone. You've become the shock absorber of your world, softening every blow so others can ride comfortably, even if it shatters you. And after enough time, even happiness feels fragile. Joy isn't something you can rest in, it's something you grip tightly, terrified it will disappear the moment you let go. So you hold your breath, waiting for the inevitable crash, unable to fully embrace the beauty of now because you're already preparing for its loss. This isn't just hyper-vigilance, it's the wiring of a nervous system that was trained to never relax, never trust, never release. But what if you could? What if the greatest safety isn't in gripping harder but in finally, mercifully letting go? But what if the weight isn't in what you're carrying? What if the true burden is in how tightly you're holding on? What if the very act of gripping is what's creating the strain? I want you to consider a radical, divine possibility. What if things don't fall apart when you let go? What if instead they finally, miraculously, begin to fall into place? What if the universe has been waiting for you to release your grip so it can show you a path more beautiful and aligned than you could ever have orchestrated on your own? Control, you see, doesn't begin as control, it starts as protection. It is born from a tender, wounded part of your heart that once vowed never again. You didn't choose to live this way, you were initiated into it. Somewhere, perhaps in the tender years of your childhood, maybe in the sting of a first heartbreak, you realized that things felt safer when you were the one paying the closest attention. Safety came from reading between the lines, from deciphering the unspoken language of a room. It came from predicting the emotional weather patterns of others so you could prepare your own umbrella. You learn to hold back a piece of yourself, to adjust your truth, to calculate your words, to stay perpetually prepared, just in case they left, just in case they misunderstood, just in case they got angry, just in case they didn't love you back. And so, this mechanism of control became your safety net, your quiet, tireless way of staying one step ahead of disappointment, of conflict, of the sharp, cold pain of being misunderstood or blindsided again. You became the silent guardian of your own heart, but the walls you built to keep the pain out also kept the true, expansive joy of life at a distance. And the most heartbreaking part? The world likely doesn't even see the battle you're fighting. They don't see the exhaustion behind your competence. To them, you are the responsible one. You are the organized one, the one who always has it together. You are the strong friend, the reliable colleague, the person who always shows up, always takes care of things, always keeps it together. They praise your strength, your resilience, your ability to handle so much, but inside, you are vibrating with a silent tension. Your chest stays tight, a permanent knot of unspoken anxiety. Your thoughts don't pause, they loop, a relentless carousel of what-ifs and should-haves, and your peace, that elusive sacred state of being, feels like a reward you can only earn after everything else is perfectly handled, perfectly managed, perfectly solved. But here's the secret. Everything never feels handled, does it? There's always something. There's always a new relationship you're worried about, a plan that feels uncertain, a silence that feels too loud and heavy with meaning. There's always a part of you that whispers, a voice born of old fear. If you let go now, if you relax for one moment, it will all fall apart. But what if that voice is lying? What if that voice is not your intuition, not your higher self, but simply the terrified echo of a past self who didn't have the resources you have today? What if it's not all on you? What if the immense pressure you've internalized for years, the weight you've been carrying on your spiritual shoulders, isn't actually yours to carry? That's the ultimate deception of control. It convinces you that your value, your worthiness, your very right to exist peacefully is tied to how well you can manage everything. It tells you that if you stop, if you rest, if you dare to be messy or uncertain, people will leave, things will collapse, and you'll lose your place in the world. It's a divine cosmic lie. What if the opposite is true? What if your real place, your true energetic home, only opens up the moment you stop trying so damn hard to earn it? The moment you stop over-explaining just to be understood. The moment you stop over-performing just to feel secure. The moment you stop planning every conversation in your head like it's a high-stakes negotiation for your own safety. That is the moment life starts to breathe again. Not because the world has suddenly become easier or more perfect, but because you've stopped trying to micromanage every single possibility. And in that sacred space of release, you discover something you've been yearning for. Peace doesn't come from control. Peace comes from the courageous, soul-affirming decision to stop gripping so tightly. It's not because everything is perfect, but because you recognize that you are not here to hold it all. You are here to experience it. You don't even notice the shift at first. It's quiet, subtle, almost forgettable. It's in the way your shoulders soften without you consciously telling them to. It's in the way your jaw unclenches. It's in how your thoughts, after a difficult conversation, don't loop for hours, dissecting every word. They simply settle. It's in how you no longer rehearse your emotions before sharing them, but allow them to flow with raw, beautiful authenticity. You start to speak a little slower. You start to listen a little better. You start to breathe a little deeper. And it's not because anything outside of you has fundamentally changed, but because you are no longer bracing against it anymore. When you finally stop trying to control everything, you don't lose yourself. You don't dissolve into chaos. You actually find the part of you that was buried underneath the immense pressure. The authentic you, the true you, the part of you that doesn't live in a constant state of reaction. The part of you that doesn't need to defend, correct, or predict. The part of you that doesn't see silence as a threat or a judgment, but as a space for communion with your own soul. The part that doesn't view other people's disappointment as a reflection of your failure. You stop reading between every line, searching for hidden meanings and potential threats. You stop monitoring the energy in every room, trying to adjust your own frequency to match it. You stop rewriting your own sacred boundaries based on who might get uncomfortable. And the most powerful part of this awakening? You don't need everything to go your way anymore. Why? Because you no longer see unpredictability as danger. You've made peace with not knowing. You have learned to sit in the sacred space of the in-between without desperately trying to fill it with effort, with words, with doing. You've realized that peace isn't about having control, it's about feeling safe even when you don't. And that one shift changes everything. It changes your entire reality. Because the truth is, control doesn't prevent pain. It never did. It just prolongs your fear of it. It keeps you stuck in your head, endlessly preparing, endlessly strategizing, but never truly, fully living. It makes you forget what it feels like to trust. Not just to trust life or other people, but to trust yourself. To trust that you can handle things when they come, instead of living in a state of constant rehearsal for tragedies that may never happen. To trust that you don't need to fix every emotional ripple the second it appears. To trust that space is not abandonment, that silence is not rejection, and that change is not collapse. When you stop controlling everything, you begin to notice things you never had the energetic space to feel before. You notice how often people love you even when you aren't trying to earn it. You notice how life sometimes surprises you in the most beautiful, magical ways, but only after you've let go of the reins. You notice how much lighter you feel when you're no longer dragging a lifetime of expectations behind you like a suit of armor. Letting go isn't weakness, it's not quitting. It's not giving up on outcomes. It is the ultimate act of choosing yourself. It's choosing your own divine essence over the illusion that control equals peace. And there's something no one tells you about this sacred surrender. At first, it doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like loss. It feels like you're free-falling without a net. Not because you've lost anything real, but because you're losing the identity you built around being on, around being the manager, the fixer, the strong one. Your brain, so accustomed to the hum of anxiety, doesn't know what to do with the silence. You'll catch yourself trying to create a problem, to start a tiny fire of worry, just to feel the familiar comfort of being in control. You'll start overthinking again, not because something is actually wrong, but because your nervous system is detoxing from a lifetime of being on high alert. Letting go doesn't always feel light at first. Sometimes, it just feels like nothing. An eerie, profound stillness that can feel unsafe, because when you've spent your entire life scanning for what could go wrong, a state of calm can feel deeply, unsettlingly suspicious. This is where the true inner work, the alchemical process, begins. It's the inner conflict. A part of you, your soul, yearns to rest. Another part, your conditioned mind, doesn't trust it yet. A part of you wants to slow down. The other part whispers, "Are you sure it's okay to stop? What will happen if you're not watching?" This is the moment most people give up. They mistake that deep discomfort for a sign that something's wrong, that they need to grab the controls again, when in reality, it's just the absence of the noise you've gotten used to surviving in. But if you can stay with it, if you can just breathe through that discomfort for a little longer, something else starts to surface. Not anxiety, not panic, but a deep, unshakable clarity. You start noticing, with a new kind of spiritual sight, what was never yours to carry in the first place. That conversation you keep replaying in your mind, it was their energy, not yours. That emotional mess someone handed to you to fix, it was their lesson, not yours to learn for them. That version of you who never said no out loud, who bent and folded to keep the peace, gone. Not with force, but with the creation of sacred space, with stillness, with a profound decision to no longer fuel what depletes you. And in that space, you begin to experience a kind of clarity that doesn't scream, it doesn't rush, it doesn't need to convince, it simply exists, calm, quiet, solid. And suddenly, you're not living to prove your worth anymore. You're living to protect your peace. You stop inserting yourself into problems you didn't create. You stop fixing people who never asked to be saved. You stop explaining your boundaries like they're up for negotiation. You finally let life unfold. Not because you've given up, but because you've given in. You've surrendered to presence, to trust, to the kind of profound self-respect that doesn't come from being in control, but from being clear about what is no longer yours. You'll notice this change in small ways before you ever notice it in big ones. It happens in a conversation where you feel that familiar, powerful urge to over-explain yourself, but this time you pause. And you don't. It happens when someone misunderstands you, and you don't immediately rush to fix their perception. You allow them to sit with it, knowing your truth is not dependent on their understanding. It happens when your plans fall through, and instead of spiraling into anxiety, you just breathe and adjust. You're not shutting down, you're not avoiding, you are simply no longer reacting from a place of fear. And that, my friend, is what real freedom feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, not worthy of a social media post. Just a softer, slower, sacred return to yourself. You are no longer performing presence, you are living it. You make decisions without asking the world for permission. You say no, and you don't feel the need to attach a 5-paragraph apology to justify it. You feel something rise in your chest, and instead of shutting it down, you get curious. You lean in. Not everything needs to be managed. Not every emotion needs to be redirected. Not every situation needs your intervention. You start to understand that peace is not passive, it is intentional. You have to choose it in every moment where your old conditioned patterns try to pull you back in. The pattern that says, don't make them uncomfortable. The pattern that says, handle it now so no one gets upset. The pattern that whispers, fix it, fix it, fix it. But now you meet that pattern with something new, something powerful, stillness. Not because you don't care, but because you finally trust that it's not your job to hold the world together. You let people think what they think. You let outcomes unfold without chasing them down. You let life breathe, even when it's awkward, unclear, or slower than you want it to be. And in doing so, you find something no amount of control ever gave you: lightness. Not because your life is suddenly perfect, but because you've stopped weighing it down with the pressure to orchestrate everything. You start to experience yourself in a new way, more grounded, more honest, more aware of what actually matters versus what was just noise dressed as urgency. And that's when you begin to realize you didn't need the control at all. You just needed to stop believing it was your responsibility in the first place. Then, something else begins to shift, not just inside you, but around you. People start to notice, even if they can't put it into words. The ones who were used to you always saying yes might pause when you say, not this time. The ones who relied on your emotional labor might feel confused when you stop showing up to smooth everything over. The ones who only knew the version of you that shrank, softened, or over-delivered, they may pull back. Not because you've changed in a bad way, but because you are no longer carrying what was keeping them comfortable. And that can be disorienting, even lonely at first. It's strange to realize how much of your presence was built around managing others. But what's even stranger, how many people stay, not for what you do, but for who you actually are beneath all of it. You begin attracting a different energy when you stop trying to control everything. Not because you're doing anything flashy, but because calm has its own gravity. You become a kind of mirror, not the type that distorts itself to make others feel safe, but the kind that reflects the truth quietly, without manipulation, without performance. Your boundaries become clearer, not louder. Your conversations become cleaner, not colder. Your emotional presence becomes richer because it's no longer rooted in obligation or fear, and that's the real shift. You're not trying to be liked anymore. You're not trying to be impressive. You're not trying to be palatable, fixable, or marketable. You're just being real. Not raw in a chaotic way, but real in a peaceful way. And real has power because it's rare in a world addicted to noise, to doing, to chasing, to proving. Being grounded, open, and unbothered becomes your most natural form of rebellion. You no longer filter every word through fear. You no longer stay silent just to avoid tension. You no longer interpret other people's discomfort as your responsibility to fix. You trust that discomfort can coexist with respect, that boundaries don't require guilt, that peace doesn't require perfection, only clarity. And in that sacred space, your life starts to realign. Not because you're forcing it, but because you've made room for it. Room for honest relationships, room for deeper rest. Room for self-trust, the kind that doesn't need constant validation to stand strong. This is what alignment feels like. Not having control over every part of your life, but finally realizing you don't need to. You don't need to explain yourself in every conversation just to feel valid. You don't need to keep every plate spinning just to prove you're responsible. You don't need to chase peace by managing everyone else's expectations. Because the truth is, life was never meant to be held that tightly, and when you stop controlling everything, something unexpected and truly magical happens. Life starts meeting you in the middle. The people who belong in your life begin to move toward you without pressure. The decisions that used to drain you become easier to make. The future that once felt so heavy and fraught with peril starts to feel spacious, open, and full of grace. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become passive or cold. It just means you stop shrinking yourself to hold everything in place. You begin to trust, not in a fantasy, but in something more honest, that you can show up fully and still let go. That you can be deeply present without being in charge of the outcome. That you can live without overcorrecting, overthinking, or overgiving. Because peace isn't something you chase. It's something that rises when you stop interrupting what wants to unfold. And yes, it's unfamiliar at first, but eventually it becomes your new normal, your new rhythm, your new beautiful weightlessness. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped carrying what wasn't yours.